Most of us enjoy watching the wildlife and the birds, both in the wild and around our home. There does come a time with several of these wildlife species when they start robbing the fruits of our labors in the garden or making a general mess of our lawn and landscape, and we need to take some sort of action to protect what we've done in our garden and in our home landscaping. There are several different animals and birds that can cause a problem, and we'll be talking today about several of them and ways that you can use both to either control them, to get rid of them, or just to keep them out of your hair and keep them from causing problems. The first one we'll talk about is a pocket gopher. It's a native rodent. There are two different species that live in Oklahoma. Both of them you can treat pretty much the same. The control methods and the damage are pretty much the same. Pocket gophers are rather mouse-like, about this big. They burrow in the ground. The first signs that you'll usually see if you have pocket gophers are the mounds of soil. They'll be about 6 inches tall, and they can be up to 18 to 24 inches wide. You won't see the tunnels because the tunnels are underground about 6 to 15 inches, and one pocket gopher can make an awful lot of tunnel and an awful lot of mounds of soil. One pocket gopher can have a network of tunnels that can cover up to 1 acre. So even though you see several mounds over a wide area of ground, you may not have as many pocket gophers as you think you do. Now, pocket gophers are often confused with moles. Moles are totally different. You can tell moles will leave piles of dirt, but you'll be able to see the tunnels because moles only burrow just an inch or two below the ground. So you will be able to follow the trails of a mole much more readily. A pocket gopher, you will not see where the tunnels are. They're too far underground. Pocket gophers are a problem, a definite problem to gardens. They will eat plant material, roots, bulbs, and other below ground vegetables like carrots, turnips. They can cause an extensive amount of damage to your plantings. Moles, on the other hand, are insect eating. They eat grubs, earthworms, and any other insects that they can come upon. However, even though the moles do not cause direct damage to your plants, the mice that follow in the moles' burrows do. And the moles can leave unsightly trails in your lawn. So even though they don't damage the plants directly, it is often a benefit to get rid of the moles, just to get rid of the unsightly trails and to prevent damage from mice. Now, pocket gophers in the wild serve a very useful purpose. They're much like earthworms. As they burrow in the soil, they loosen the soil, bring it up, and they constantly bring it up to the surface, much like earthworms do. So out in the wild, they are very valuable. Once they get into the yard, there's really little place for coexistence between you and them, because they can cause extensive damage and they leave these unsightly piles. For pocket gophers, there are 3 main ways of controlling them. First of these is by using a poison bait. Generally this is either strychnine or zinc phosphide poisoned grain. It's very important that you get this poison bait down inside the tunnels so you don't poison birds and you don't poison any non-target animals like your pets. But when placed correctly, the poison baits can be very safe and very effective. The second way of controlling them is by trapping them. As I said, one pocket gopher can cover quite a bit of area. So if you're just in a yard situation, trapping is very effective and very safe both for you and for other non-target species like your pets, such as the Smackaby trap. These are commonly available and are very effective against pocket gophers. They're placed in the main tunnel or in the side tunnel so that as the pocket gopher comes up, hits the trap, you catch the gopher. You may need to reset this several times to make certain you have caught all of your pocket gophers, but for a small area, this is very effective. The third method is what we did to our bulb bed last fall, and that's exclusion. That's by lining all of your beds, either your ornamental beds or your vegetable garden beds, with 1/4-inch galvanized hardware cloth. What this does, it just physically excludes the gophers. The gophers cannot get to your vegetable or ornamental plants and therefore cannot cause damage. This is expensive and time-consuming, but you may need to resort to this if where you live is adjacent to fields and you have a constant influx of pocket gophers. In that situation, either trapping or poison bait isn't totally effective because you constantly have migration coming in. So under high pressure, high populations of pocket gophers, the exclusion is probably your best method of controlling them. Occasionally you'll see in garden catalogs seeds for a plant called gopher purge. This is a euphorbia plant. The roots of it are supposed to repel gophers. I've never seen any results confirming this. Some people try it and like it. Others do not have success with it. But really your most effective means are going to be trapping or physical exclusion. Another rodent that you often have trouble with, especially if you're trying to grow pecans, are squirrels. If you've ever grown pecans, you've probably spent the fall watching them carry away the fruits of your labor. Squirrels can be very difficult to control because they're very mobile and they're very numerous. If you have any trees that connect with your property and your pecan tree, the squirrel can come in through the branches, steal your pecans, and leave and never touch the ground. If you need to, try and get rid of the trees that come up and touch your pecan trees so the squirrels have to go down to the ground and come across. Squirrels do not like running across the ground. They're more open to predation from cats, dogs, and other predators. And so that will help somewhat in keeping the squirrels away from the pecans. Occasionally squirrels will cause problems with fruit trees and in the vegetable garden. You can do a little bit of exclusion for squirrels in that situation by putting up a fence that's buried at least 12 inches into the ground, because squirrels can dig, and put an electric wire, a fence charger electric wire. Don't just hook it up to the outlet. Use a fence charger. Put an electric wire around the top so that the squirrels, as they come up, hit that wire, get a shock, and don't come back. But other than that, the only alternative is to trap the squirrels, either with a leg hold trap or with a live trap. If you're in the city and you catch it in a live trap and haul it to the other side of the city, someone on the other side is going to have a problem with the squirrel. Trap it, bring it over back to your side of the city. You have a jet set squirrel. It spends half its summer just traveling around the city. Your most effective means are going to be getting rid of it or some sort of exclusion. Again, with squirrels, there's not that much that you can do. However, we'll talk about deer. There are several things you can do about that. Deer can be a problem, especially in rural areas. They're mostly a problem on landscape plantings, especially in a fruit orchard, and most especially on very young trees such as this. If the deer comes along, takes 3 bites off of this, a good portion of your tree is gone. Again, there are several ways of controlling deer. Probably one of the most effective is by putting a fence around the area. This can be a regular woven wire fence, as long as it's at least 8 to 12 feet tall, and make certain that the deer cannot crawl underneath it or through any loose corners. It must be a solid fence. A more effective type of fence is an electric fence. It must be at least 5 feet tall and have at least 5 wires. And as the deer tries to go through it, if a deer can go through a fence, it'll do that rather than go to the effort of jumping over. And if it has an open 5-wire fence, it will try and climb through it, and it will be shocked. And tests have shown that this is probably one of the most effective types of fence to keep deer out of an area. Now, the chargers that go with the electric fences, the most effective for deer control are the high voltage, low impedance type of chargers, commonly called the New Zealand type of charger. These are very effective both for keeping cattle in and keeping deer out. There are several repellents on the market for deer control, and they fall into 2 classes. There are the taste repellents and the area repellents. Taste repellents make the foliage taste bad, so the deer will, after sampling it, will move off to another area to feed on foliage that tastes better. One of the most common of these, there are several brands, but they're mostly all based on thiram. Thiram is actually a fungicide, is used as a fungicide, but it does have the property of making the foliage and trunk taste bad to deer and also rabbits. So it can be very effective, usually used just as a dormant season spray. The problem with it is it needs to be frequently reapplied. If you have a heavy rain, it will wash it off and your trees will no longer be protected. So it needs frequent reapplication. Another taste repellent, which you may not think of, is hot pepper sauce. If you mix 2 tablespoons of hot pepper sauce with 12.5 gallons of water and add enough wilt-proof or vapor guard, those are common materials used to prevent desiccation of evergreen plants during the winter. That helps hold the hot pepper sauce onto the trees, onto the shrubbery, and again, it makes it taste bad to the deer. Now, as far as area repellents, these make the area where the trees are smell inhospitable to the deer. They come in, get uneasy, and leave. They don't want to come in for various reasons. Human hair has been used. A little bag of human hair in each tree, especially around the perimeters. It smells obviously like people, and if the deer have been under hunting pressure and have learned to be afraid of a human smell, they will avoid an area that smells like there's a person there. Again, you need to replace the hair fairly frequently, about once a month. Their blood meal and tankage, both animal byproducts, smell like death. The deer comes into the orchard, it smells like there's something dead in there, doesn't want to go in because there could be trouble, and again, it will leave. Highly perfumed soaps, such as Camay or Cashmere Bouquet, put a string, make a hole through the soap with the paper wrapper on, tie a string, tie 1 to each tree. Again, highly odored, smells like people, the deer will stay away. Sounds strange, but it has been shown to be quite effective. Now, there are several other commercial products. One of these is Magic Circle. That's made out of bone tar oil. It's made from heating bones and gathering the distillate, and that's used as an area repellent. There's several others. One is Deer Away, which smells like rotten eggs because that's exactly what it is. It is putrefied egg solids. And it acts both as a taste repellent and as an area repellent. It makes the area smell bad. And that has been shown to be very effective for keeping deer out of orchards or out of areas. Another is Hinder. Now, Hinder is rather interesting. It's ammonium soaps of fatty acids. It was originally developed as a spreader sticker for pesticide applications. And then they noticed down in Florida in citrus groves where they're using it as a spreader sticker that they had much less damage from deer. And they did some further testing, found it to be a highly effective repellent for deer. And so now they've remarketed it as a deer repellent, even though it started out strictly as a spreader sticker. All of these repellents will need to be reapplied fairly frequently, and if most of them don't weather terribly well, and also they make the foliage taste bad or the area seem inhospitable. But if the deer is hungry enough, it's going to come in and feed anyway. So most repellents, their efficiency is based upon reduction in damage, not total elimination of damage. The best method of deer control is by using some sort of fence, especially a high voltage electric fence, and just keep the deer out of the area entirely. Rabbits may be cute, but they're also one of the most destructive animals that you can have around your home orchard and your garden. They'll cause damage to ornamental plantings and to fruit trees by gnawing on the bark and also chewing off small branches that they can get to, that they can reach from the ground. You can tell deer damage from rabbit damage by looking at the end cut. A rabbit bite will be clean cut. A deer, when it pulls off the branch, it'll leave a little bit of a ragged edge. So that's one way you can tell deer damage from rabbit damage. Repellents, the Thiram that worked for deer, also effective on rabbits. Blood meal, In the garden, if you spread some blood meal down along the rows, it often will keep the rabbits away from that row. It also acts as a fertilizer for your vegetable garden. Despite rabbits being as destructive as they are, they're also one of the easiest ones to deter from your garden. All you need is a 2-foot chicken wire fence. It needs to be either very flush with the ground so the rabbit cannot get through, or bury it very slightly and have it at least 2 feet tall and tied to fairly secure poles. The rabbit won't jump or climb over, and as long as it doesn't see any openings that it thinks it can crawl through, it won't try to dig under or crawl under. So really, they are quite easy to keep out of your garden with just a little bit of effort. If you have individual trees to protect, probably one of the most effective ways is to use a 1/4-inch mesh galvanized hardware cloth. This keeps the rabbits away from the tree trunk. It doesn't need to be anywhere near this tall. You can get by again with about a 2-foot height. Make sure when you put it on to leave enough room in there for about 5 years of growth of the tree, just so you don't have to keep readjusting it every year. If you take and make a hardware cloth cylinder for each tree and you bury it 6 inches into the ground, it will also serve as a very effective guard against mice. Mice can burrow down underneath, so you need to have that 6-inch depth into the soil to prevent mouse damage. Mouse damage is usually only a problem in the fruit orchard and usually only on apples or pears. By using a tree guard such as this and keeping the grass mowed short and keeping the mulch away from the tree trunk, you can generally take care of any mouse problems that you've got. There are a few other animals that you may have problems with: raccoons, possums, and woodchucks. These are larger animals. A good sturdy fence, buried 6 to 12 inches, and with an electric wire around the top above the regular fence will usually keep these animals out and most of your animal pests out of your garden. Short of that, trapping is very effective both for the woodchuck, opossum, raccoon, and also the rabbit. It's best to use a live trap, a box trap, because where you're going to be having the trap set up and the size of the trap is also suitable for catching small dogs and cats. So you want to be able to release them unharmed if you do catch your neighbor's cat, if you want to stay on good terms with your neighbor and me. So our next category is birds. Let's go talk about them. Many kinds of birds can be a definite benefit in the garden, such as bluebirds and other insect-eating birds. There are several birds that can give you problems. Blue jays and crows are the bane of any pecan grower. They will carry off incredible quantities of pecans and rob you just as much as squirrels can. Unfortunately, for the homeowner, there isn't anything you can do. They're so mobile, they can come in and get out before you can ever do anything. You just have to accept the loss of pecans to the blue jays and the crows. In your small fruit plantings, grapes, strawberries, and blueberries, fruits being so small, are very prone to loss to birds such as robins and other fruit-eating birds. There are several ways of taking care of them. Commercially, growers will use scare cannon. This is a propane-driven gun. It lets off a very loud bang at periodic intervals, which sounds like a shotgun and scares the birds off. This isn't at all practical in town. You will not have any happy neighbors within a mile of you. There are several other methods that rely on scare tactics, such as dangling metal pie pans, noisemakers, rattling type makers. These again will frighten the birds off. There are also stuffed animals, inflatable animals such as stuffed owls, inflatable snakes that look like predators of the birds, again to scare the birds off. Any of these scaring type devices are only effective as long as the birds are scared of them. Generally, they're initially very effective. Then if it's repeated, the birds get used to it and they lose their effectiveness. So especially with the stuffed owl and the inflatable snake, move them around. A real owl is not going to sit in the same spot for a week, and birds know this. Move the owl from one perch to another to keep the birds off guard. If you're using scare techniques, it's also best to vary the techniques. Maybe use the owl for 1 week, go to a snake the next, some pie pans the next. Keep changing, keep the birds off guard, keep them uneasy so that they'll stay away. Probably one of the most effective ways of dealing with bird damage is by some sort of exclusion. Not fencing, because they can come down and fly down right into the plants. What you need is some sort of netting to drape over the plants that goes all the way down to the ground so the birds can't come up underneath. You can buy commercially, most places now, some sort of polypropylene netting designed just for birds, to keep birds out, or you can just use cheesecloth netting. That's also very effective, very cheap. The cheesecloth will usually only last 1 season. These polypropylene nettings, usually if you're careful, you can save them over and save them for several years and get several years use out of them. If you have a relatively small fruit planting, you might want to consider building a structure around it, putting in some posts and putting a chicken wire netting and completely enclose your planting. It sounds like an awful lot of trouble, and it is, but if you have a small area and you build it sturdily, it'll last you for 10, 15, 20 years. Even though it's a lot of expense and trouble at first, it's a very low maintenance item after that and lasts quite a long time and can be effective on a small planting. For something like grapes, you can often use small net bags or the ends of used pantyhose to cover around each individual cluster, both to keep the birds from getting to the fruit and also to disguise the fruit somewhat so the birds don't realize that it is a cluster of grapes in there. To control wildlife effectively in your home grounds and garden, it's often going to require using several different techniques rather than relying just on one to get good control of wildlife. If you have any questions on wildlife control, either for animals that we haven't discussed or for more information, contact your local county office and they'll be glad to help you.